What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another video. Season 1 is over. Okay guys, you get the idea. The season has come to an end, and so I am now shifting gears back into my old style of content. Off-season DW Fan 91 content. No! We had our fun, we had our laughs. Now it's back to boring old waiting. Come back, Doctor Who! Come back! And so here we are with the tier list. Let's go, guys. Tier list, remember those? Tier lists, my beloved. We're back! And today we're going to be ranking all of Russell T Davies 2. Count them with me. 1, 2. So far there have been 12 episodes in Russell T Davies 2 so far, which means we are almost at the equivalent of one previous series of Doctor Who. Isn't that sad? But there are specials here too, man. Let's go. I can't believe it, guys. We've got so many episodes. When is season 2 coming out, man? So today we're going to be ranking them all, giving my detailed thoughts on each and every episode, and then at the end of the video I'm going to be ranking it compared to every other modern series in Doctor Who and see where it all totals to. You know what I'm saying. Are you ready? Here we go. So don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, because trust me, I kid, but a lot of the content coming up is gonna be exquisite. So don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and let's just start with the Star Beast. What a wonderful episode. Okay. Let me back up. As you guys can see on the tier list, we have 11 episodes in total. 11 episodes in total.
What?
I was the first one to say it, but that episode count, man, we need to raise that up. Now everyone's saying it. You guys acted like I was crazy. But anyway, 3 of these are of course the 60th anniversary specials with the 14th Doctor played by David Tennant. One of these is of course the Church on Ruby Road, the Christmas special of 2023. And then the rest is season 1. I kind of want to skip, I'm not going to fully skip over them. I'm still going to explain, but I'm going to speed run through the first 4 episodes here, because as you guys have already seen, I have made multiple videos each on all of those episodes, because they've been out for kind of like 6 months, you know what I mean. If you guys are really curious for my in-depth thoughts where I go through the whole narrative and go through my full feelings and evolution of my feelings, there is a video called the 60th anniversary ultimate review. I think it's called, I don't even fucking remember. But anyway, I made this video on my channel. It's quite long, it's quite detailed, and it goes over not just these episodes but the whole of 2023 in full depth. So if you want to hear more about me talking about the Star Beast or Wobbly Yonder or the Giggle or even the Church on Ruby Road, although to be honest in that video I didn't actually talk about the episode that much because it was mostly focused on the 60th, you guys already know, then I would massively recommend checking that video out. It's a good video, man. But anyway, my feelings on the Star Beast have evolved over time drastically. If you had asked me where I would put this episode on the day that it aired, the night that it aired, I'm not gonna lie to you, I think this would be like an E tier for me. I fucking hated it, man. I despised it. I really did not like this episode when I first watched it. As you guys know, I gave this episode what, like a 3 out of 10 when I first watched it. Yeah, I did not like it, bros. And why? I kind of didn't really understand why I didn't enjoy it so much, because spoiler alert, now that I've seen the episode again and again and again, I kind of like it now. I think it's pretty cool. I'm a Star Beast enjoyer, a Star Beast defender. I'm the first one on the battlefield to defend a lot of these episodes. As you guys already know, I am the #1 season 1 fan after all. But anyway, what changed and what was it that made me dislike the episode so much when I first watched it? I think it was a mixture of hype towards the 60th anniversary and also a bunch of things that were just personal to me, in that I was of course a massive fan of Power of the Doctor. I love that story and I do like the Chibnall era in general, and a lot of people really love to pretend that it is the worst fucking thing ever in the whole history of ever. I'm not gonna lie, if you're gonna be objective with it, you know, objective as close as to objectivity as you can be, because you know, of course everyone's subjective and all that, blah 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 blah. If you're being real, if you're being honest with yourself and you watch those episodes in the Chibnall era, you watch episodes like The Woman Who Fell to Earth, The Ghost Monument, Rosa, Demons of the Punjab, It Takes You Away, etc, etc, all of those episodes, you'd be hard pressed to really call them bad. And the general average quality episode in the Chibnall era, like Nikola Tesla Night of Terror, Praxius. Actually, can you hear me? it's alright. I actually rewatched it recently and it was kind of enjoyable. But anyway, those are like the average episode quality, and yeah, they're not like crazy, unbelievable best episode ever, but they're pretty cool, they're enjoyable. If we're being really honest with ourselves, it's kind of hard to treat the Chibnall era as anything but at worst slightly mediocre. I mean, that's just how it is at worst, man. I mean, we can pretend and we can blow a bunch of problems out of proportion and we can act like a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter is the biggest deal in the whole world. But if we're being honest with ourselves and we're watching these episodes, they would most likely watch it and go, you know what, that was alright. Like, not the best thing I've ever seen in the world, but like not really that bad. I was actually thinking about this today while I was in the shower, but the worst of the worst Chibnall era episode, which is probably Legend of the Sea Devils, is what most people think the rest of the Chibnall era is like. The truth is, most of the Chibnall era is not actively bad. In fact, most of Doctor Who in general is not actively bad. New Who as well. But for most people, the Chibnall era, it just doesn't reach those high highs and kind of sits at a mediocre average, which is why, as I say, at worst, if you're being honest with yourself, at worst, it's just slightly mediocre. Which, I mean, I can understand. A show like Doctor Who, it really relies on keeping people emotionally invested and emotionally devastated consistently. You know, like crazy moments one after the other, bursts of hype, dopamine hits. That's kind of where New Who excelled, and that's what got a lot of people in. So in the Chibnall era, you can see it turned a lot of people away because it was just boring, you know? I've said this before, I think that the two main culprits for why people dislike the Chibnall era so much isn't a female doctor, and it isn't the scripts, it isn't really any of that. I genuinely think it's the fact that the music is not really bombastic anymore. We're not Murray Gold, we're Sagan Akinola, whose songs are a lot more chill. And the fact that it's kind of boring. There aren't really crazy things happening in the way where Chris Chibnall might think that The Timeless Child is a crazy thing, but to all of us, the audience, we know that that's not really that crazy. An episode like The Doctor Falls, the series 10 finale, that is not boring. I mean, that's just concept after concept that fans of the show have been clamoring for ages. So much so where it might not appeal to like a mainstream everyday audience, but to us, the fans, we look at that episode and we're like, holy shit, I'm so invested. This is so cool. The Chibnall era doesn't really have that because all of its best episodes are really quiet and slow and contemplative. I'm all down for slow-paced episodes, not really focused on hard sci-fi. I love shit like that. Historical episodes inject it right into my veins, baby. But a lot of people are here for the crazy sci-fi shenanigans, for the crazy monsters, for the crazy action, for the crazy character dynamics and all of that. Series 11 to me is great because I didn't want there to be returning villains. But in the fandom, even though people still to this day are like, we don't want returning villains, the truth is, yeah, you fucking do. We all know you're full of shit. You guys love that returning stuff. I think also the Chibnall era came at a really bad time because the Moffat era primed a lot of fans to expect certain stuff. And the Chibnall era, I say this all the time, but each era of the show is basically its own new TV show, RTD2 included, by the way. And the Chibnall era is like a totally different TV show coming right after the Moffat era. None of the fans expected it, and to be honest, not a lot of them wanted it. Me personally, I'm a lot more accepting because I enjoyed the direction that they went in. What has this got to do with the Russell T Davies 2 era? Well, actually, it's directly on topic because similarly to how the Moffat era kind of primed people with the Chibnall era to expect one thing, and then the Chibnall era gave them something totally unbelievably different, the Russell T Davies 2 era did the exact same thing. After the Chibnall era ended, I was expecting something way different in quality, way different in caliber. I'd almost trick myself, even though I like the Chibnall era, that the Russell T Davies 2 era would be a wild step up in quality, not realizing that the Chibnall era is actually kind of cool. Coming as someone who likes the Chibnall era. So when the Star Beast went out and it was about the same quality as a regular Chibnall era episode, so like Praxius or Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror and all that, it's about that same level, but I was so discombobulated. I was confused. It was one of the most confusing watch experiences I've ever had, especially because they had that previously on Once Upon a Time Lord sequence, which I was convinced was an ad. So when it was part of the actual episode, I was just left confused. And then immediately the Doctor runs into Donna Noble in the first frame of the episode. I was just like, what the fuck is going on? But seriously, this episode makes so much more sense once you realize what is going on. It's clearly flawed. This episode is way too short. That's the most obvious flaw. Every single one of the ingredients to make an incredible episode is here, here, but it's just not given enough time. The shed and plushies aspect is the most clear one to me because I really love that imagery. It's so well directed as well, with the sign falling down and then the shed being the TARDIS, and then all of the plushies in there. I do find it a bit weird. The sound effects they use is a little bit jarring, but still it gets the point across, and that all works. But it would work so much better if we'd been able to see them, if there had been an extended sequence in that shed where we got a good look at the plushies, where we got a good look at the shed, because that stuff really is cool. It really reminds me of, you know, children's books that I used to read, stuff like that. I do really love that imagery, and I wish it had got more of a chance to shine, but it's just too fast paced. There's just too much. There are, of course, some pretty weird lines at the end. The resolution to the episode is mega rushed, and it's a real shame because I think this episode had the potential to be Partners in Crime 2, which, if you don't know, Partners in Crime is an incredible episode, in my opinion, the premiere to series 4, and is exactly what this episode was trying to be. The difference being that that episode has enough time to tell the story that it wants to, and this one just simply doesn't. And now that I've gotten all that negativity out of the way, I can talk about all the positive stuff, which is David Tennant as the Doctor. He's bloody brilliant. The sequence where he arrives at the Noble household, where he's peeping through the letterbox, Donna Noble's in the garden, Beep the Meep's there, Sylvia's caught in between. It's just brilliant. Speaking as someone who wasn't a fan of the 14th Doctor idea, that was another thing that was going against me when I was watching this episode for the first time. I was like, man, I do not want to watch the 14th Doctor. I was wrong. I'll call myself out. David Tennant is incredible in all 3 of these episodes, and I love that he's here. Yes, I think the idea of the 14th Doctor is kind of stupid, but in practice it works, so who am I to complain? Beep the Meep is incredible. I love the Wrath Warriors. I love how faithful they were to the design. I love that it's Battersea Power Station. But all of these elements of the episode I really like, and there are so many scenes, individual scenes in the episode which I really like. But I do think it is an incredibly flawed episode, and for that reason I'm going to put it in C tier, which is still a good episode. It's still a good rating, because I do think this is a good episode, flaws and all. And I'll go out to bat for it. Up next is Wild Blue Yonder, and I promise I won't talk about them all as in depth as I did that one. But Wild Blue Yonder is an episode which I think is incredibly well written, incredibly well directed, incredibly well performed, and just has a few tiny things which let it down again. The main one being that it's incredibly buttfuck ugly, which is a shame because, as I said, it's an incredibly well directed episode. It's actually stunning. I'm taken aback by it every time I go back to it. The sound cues as well. Maury Gold, while his work in the Star Beast wasn't really the best, Wild Blue Yonder onwards, I think it might be some of the best stuff he's ever done since 2008. He kind of tapered off in series 10, which is why that soundtrack isn't even out, which is a massive shame because Maury Gold is one of the most talented people ever. I'ma just say it. But I'm so glad we have him back now because, oh my god, this is one of my favorite soundtracks from his ever. And as I said, it's just an incredibly well directed episode. I've seen the behind the scenes and I've seen interviews with the director of this episode, and I mean, he's incredibly talented, and it shows because there's so many sequences in the episode that just mwah. But that main corridor and the main monsters, man,
what the hell is this?
It is a real shame, the Snapchat filters and all of that, because I do think if we're talking purely from a writing standpoint, from the page, this is a near perfect episode. It's basically a perfect episode. It's so close to perfect that I'm just going to call it perfect. It has my favorite line of Rusty Davies 2 so far, which is the goosebumps like Braille, you're reading us. I think that is, man, every time. He is good, man. He is good. Love him or hate him, he is good. I love what this episode does with the characters. I love that Wilf shows up at the end. It was great to have him back, even if just for a little bit. And I just love each and every element about this episode. I think it's a very solid episode of Doctor Who. Very easy, 7 out of 10 for me. And so for that reason, I'm going to put it in B tier. Love that episode. And then we follow that up with The Giggle, the climax finale of the 2023 specials, even though it's the third of 4. The last one with David Tennant and the one with Neil Patrick Harris's Toymaker, and I think both of those two actually steal the show here. This is another writing masterclass from Russell T Davies. The first 2 acts of this story I would say are some of the best stuff that he's ever written for the program. It at least rivals some of his best episodes, I would say. The Spice Up Your Life sequence, wonderful. It's spectacular. That's the word I'm looking for. It's spectacular. It's one of those scenes which you imagine in your head for years and years and years and years, and then it comes in and it's just everything you ever wanted. I think it's one of my dream scenes. I love sequences like that. I love villains like that. I think it was performed incredibly. I think it was imagined perfectly. It is the highlight of the specials for me, and I think Neil Patrick Harris in general as the toy maker just excels from the word go. The first scene of the episode, the pre-title sequence, just love it. The introduction of Unit. Russell T Davies has done so much in such a little time to get me back invested in Unit. In his first era, I did not like them. They were really uncharismatic and unlikable and cold. In the Moffat era, they were slightly better, but still really boring. And finally, after 19 years, it feels that New Who has finally gotten Unit right with this band of characters, this nice cast of characters. They rotate in and out with Shirley and I know his real name is Lenny Rush, Morris Gibbons. I really like all of that. I like the headquarters. I love Ibrahim, he's cool, badass as hell. And Kate Stewart finally has been given a personality that isn't that of a wet flannel. She had fucking nothing before, and finally in this episode we see a connection between her and the Doctor, with her hugging the Doctor, and I was just like, oh thank God, man. Gemma Redgrave is such a talented actress. She's been great in Doctor Who as well before, but her character was just nothing. It was just a complete blank slate. It was like, remember the Brigadier? Finally, we have an insight into the character's inner workings, thoughts and feelings, likes and dislikes. Even just that one line in Legend of Ruby Sunday is like, I love Davina. That just adds so much more to what she was before. That scene in Death in Heaven where she comes in and she's like, my name is Kate Stewart. I am the son of the daughter. I have kids. I am clever. I am head of unit and we killed Cybermen. It's like, who the fuck is this? Who writes characters like this, and how does anyone like a character like that? Their only gimmick is, hey, do you remember someone from the past? And most New Who fans don't even know who they're referencing. To be fair, and this is true for basically all of Doctor Who, including the original series, a lot of characters do get by on the charisma of their actors, and Gemma Redgrave is very charismatic. I mean, have you heard that laugh? And so, to be honest, I don't blame anyone for getting really attached to the character. I'm just saying, it took me quite a while, but I am now. I'm finally on the train, although I will concede that until 2023, Kate Stewart was a complete and utter fraud. It is what it is. Either way, each and every element of this episode is working. The Doctor, Donna, Unit, the toy maker, the past, the present, the giggle itself, I think is just so funny and it's so well imagined. The soundtrack again is incredible. The giggle, the titular giggle itself, not just its effects, but the actual ha 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 ha, is already iconic, which I think just goes to show the quality of writing. I personally think that how intuitive something is key to how successful it is. I think personally that's a very intuitive concept, and so in my opinion, very well written. Bros, I could do a full video on what is and isn't good writing and what all that is and blah 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 blah, because to be honest, I'm still learning. I do not know what people mean when they say good writing and bad writing. I barely even know what I mean when I say good writing and bad writing. But either way, I think this episode is absolutely bloody incredible, right up until the bi-generation sequence, right up until they go onto that roof with the laser. I think it all sadly crumbles apart and results in one of my least favorite endings to a Doctor Who episode maybe ever. I hate the idea that the Doctor sits behind and gets a job and becomes a regular person with a mortgage and taxes and blah blah blah. I think it's so hopeless, and frankly it's just a character assassination. I hate the implication of you need to just stop. Fuck off, man. I hate it so much because it just isn't honest. It's not truthful to real life or to the program itself, and I just find it kind of condescending and not real. That dinner sequence I just despise. I hate dinner parties in general, but that is just, I can barely even put it into words. Demoralizing is how I would say it if I had to put a tagline on it. The bi-generation itself, I mean, I've kind of gotten over that because, I mean, just come to grips that they're never going to bother explaining it. It just is what it is. It's of course an objectively inferior version of the actual regeneration process, and makes it very difficult for people to get on board with this new Doctor, as we have seen now. A lot of people are left feeling that way though, you can't really deny that. And the giggle takes that away from it, takes away his first ever moment. I think it's funny that he's in his pants. That's the pro. The way the toy maker is defeated is disappointing. Before, I had no idea why they did the ball game, but after rewatching it again and again, it's because the toy maker says when the Doctor and Donna first enter his emporium, the ball is the first game ever invented since the Stone Age of Man. And so it's a callback to that. I really do think that they should have done something more with the cards. I think that would have been cool. Either way, that isn't the main problem. The main lasting problem with this episode is the dinner party ending sequence, which I just think is terrible. And it's such a shame because it ends on such a dud note, but the rest of it is the pinnacle, the peak of RTD2 we've gotten so far. Season 1, thankfully, soars far above. But out of these 3 episodes, this trilogy, the first 40 minutes of the giggle is the best we got so far. And so for that reason, I'm going to put it in B tier, tied with Wild Blue Yonder. And here we are with The Church on Ruby Road, the 2023 Christmas special, and an episode which I think has aged really well. I think after rewatching it multiple times and after going back several months later and giving it another look, I'm quite a big fan of this one. I really enjoy the way it feels, the way it introduces the new characters, and the way it sets the scene. It is very different to season 1, which I do find weird because this is meant to be episode 1, and then we go into Space Babies, and in style, tone and production they are so vastly different, it's almost a bit disorienting. Either way, this is the weird transitionary period in the same way that the other 2023 specials were between Chibnall Who and new Disney Who. This is like a mixture of both, which you would only truly understand what I mean if you've watched these episodes a lot, because there are just clear ways in the manner in which things are shot and written and produced and all of that, and just how the episodes look and feel, that are different between these specials and season 1. And I think for the better in season 1. I think season 1 is way better than these specials. But this episode specifically, because it does have Chutagawa in it, it's a very weird feeling episode, but I do think I still like it. I'm not the biggest fan of the introduction, the start of the episode. I think it's cool enough. Not the pre-title sequence, that I think is awesome, but the nightclub, all of that, I don't know. If I were doing Doctor Who, I'd focus on stuff like that, because just me as a person, I'm not crazy into that. Or if I were to, it would be kind of in a more cynical way to show how shit nightclubs are, because I think they're awful. But that's just a me personally feeling. Of course, these lists are all subjective, so I'm not just trying to be, I'm objectively right, guys. Nah, man, I'm telling you what I think about the episodes, and that's what people are here for. I don't think people come to these videos for an objective lesson in how to and not to do Doctor Who. You guys already know for yourself, even if you can't put it into words. But I don't think that's necessarily like a real problem with the episode, that it's all in a nightclub. That's just something which I don't really like about it. But then after that, when we return to Ruby's house and we get introduced to all of these characters, that's when I think the episode really excels. I think the goblins are quite funny, quite nice villains to have on Christmas Day. I just think it's a really nice vibe, a really nice Christmassy vibe. I'm, of course, quite nostalgic for those original Russell T Davies Christmas specials, and the one which I would most likely compare this one to is The Runaway Bride, which is definitely worse than The Christmas Invasion. Both of these are worse than The Christmas Invasion, which is probably the best Russell T Davies Christmas special, although I do have a soft spot for the next Doctor. But anyway, The Christmas Invasion is definitely far and away the best one, and neither of these 2 episodes are on that level. But this does really feel like The Runaway Bride for me, which is an episode which is kind of nonsensical, kind of just having a bit of a laugh, but it's got a nice vibe and it ages really well, which I think The Church on Ruby Road does for me. The highlight of the episode is the ending sequence on Ruby Road. I think it's just so beautiful, but I also love the Doctor running across the roof, the scene where they're on the goblin ship, all of that. I just think it's a nice episode. It doesn't have incredibly high highs that Wild Blue Yonder and the Giggle has, but it also doesn't have incredibly low lows that I fear the Star Beast has. So I'd probably put it in between these 2 episodes. I'd probably put it just a little bit above the Star Beast. That being said, I don't think it quite manages to reach into B tier, so I'll put it at a nice, safe C tier, which I do still consider positive. And with all that out the way, I fear I rambled on too much for episodes that I've talked about in detail. We can finally get on to the real stuff, the real new episodes, season 1 of Doctor Who, totally not series 14, guys. What am I even saying anymore? With these episodes, I have not ranked them before. With these episodes, the ones I just talked about, those are episodes I've had months and months to think about, episodes which I've ranked before in previous videos. With season 1, my analysis analysis might be not as straightforward because I'm kind of tackling them as I talk about them. These videos are always free form, I enjoy them that way. And so forgive me if I ramble off on a few other tangents a bit more in this coming section of the video. But anyway, I still hope you all enjoy. I don't know why I'm acting like I'm ending the video. I'm just switching over to talking about a new topic. Anyway, space babies. I know, a lot of people are gonna really hate me, but I do love this one. I've said it before many times. I've been saying it a lot over the past few weeks, but I am a big season 1 fan. I am the #1 season 1 fan. I'm the biggest season 1 fan in the world, people. And part of that comes from just how much I connected with these first 2 episodes. Space babies did a lot for me. A lot of the criticisms I've seen to do with this episode, I'm not going to call them invalid. I mean, they're valid to the people who hold them. They're just completely meaningless to me. They don't affect my enjoyment whatsoever. They don't really come into consideration for me because I truly think that this episode is deceptively simple in its messaging, because a lot of people, they say, oh, it's just about abortion. It isn't. That's a small, tiny part of it. There's so many different topics culminating in this one episode, as well as it being an introduction. It harkens back to previous episode. It just has a brilliant performance from its 2 lead cast members. And I think honestly my only problem with the episode is the first 3-minute Disney insert sequence where the Doctor just gives a massive exposition dump on the state of the character. It's like, where are all my people? They're gone! He starts screaming, bro. Why are you screaming, man? Don't trauma dump on the new companion, man. Maybe I'm just used to the 13th Doctor who kept all that shit under wraps, which I kind of appreciate because I'm kind of sick of the Last of the Time Lords shit, bro. Can we drop that? The last time I was invested in the Last of the Time Lords type shit was 2013 with Day of the Doctor. After that, I was kind of just done. It's why I was so happy in Series 11 when it seemed we were dropping the Time War trauma. It's a little weird that the 13th Doctor was advertised as the first Doctor without the baggage, without the trauma, and then immediately right after, the 15th Doctor is the second Doctor advertised as the Doctor without the baggage, without the trauma. Ironically, the 15th Doctor has more baggage and trauma than the 13th, and then in Series 12 they just had to randomly squabble around to insert more trauma into the Doctor for some reason in response to the backlash to Series 11, which I always thought was out of proportion. Come on, man, can't we just have our characters having fun for a little while? Which resulted in the destruction of Gallifrey, which I think a lot of people would agree with me as one of those missteps in the Chibnall era. I actually 100% understand why he did it. I just think that the Master being the one to destroy Gallifrey is a little messy. Of course, the underlying motivation behind it is that Gallifrey is kind of boring and the Time Lords kind of ruined the show, which is why they were gotten rid of in the first place. Like, I love classic Doctor Who. I love the original Time Lords. They're a bit shit. They're a clear problem with the show that was gotten rid of with the revival for good reason. And so bringing them back in the Moffat era, especially to do absolutely nothing with them, it's only right that they got rid of again because they're trash. I say that, I do love Time Lords, but at the same time, you know, I even love Hellbent, right? But they just had to go. I do still have problems with it being the Master who got rid of them. I think that if the Master was the Timeless Child, maybe you could make that work, but then again, it ties into Deadly Assassin where power scaling wise, the Master probably could destroy the whole of Gallifrey. But yada yada yada, I'm getting way off topic. My biggest problem with Space Babies is that whole trauma dump, exposition dump right at the very start. But as soon as we're back from the dinosaur times, I just think it's amazing. I don't really have problems with the episode. I think it's just a good, solid starter premiere episode on the same level as Smith and Jones' Partners in Crime and even Rose. Episodes which I all love. Rose, I think, is quite a flawed episode. The first ever episode of Doctor Who, the pilot. Of course, I am immensely nostalgic for it, and I love Christopher Eccleston, and I love Billie Piper's Rose. And there's so many parts of it which I think are amazing, especially the first act. The first act of Rose is practically flawless, but if we're being real, that first episode, you know, it does have flaws. I don't think even anyone on the production would disagree that the episode has immense flaws. I mean, the director who they got to make that episode had such a bad falling out with everyone that he was never asked back again. And I was watching the commentary track of Rose because that's how big a nerd I am. I watch the commentary tracks of Doctor Who, can you believe it? It had Rusty Davies, Julie Gardner and Phil Collinson on it, and none of them even seemed very satisfied with it, which, I mean, to be fair, that's because it hadn't come out yet, so they didn't know it was going to be big. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that Russell T Davies' first episodes, premiere episodes, generally speaking, apart from New Earth, have a soft spot in my heart, and I think Space Babies fits just right in. Yeah, it's a bit cheesy, I suppose. The titular space babies are funny in how silly they are. But for me, man, I just think it all works. I think the Bogeyman is a great antagonist. Again, it goes back to that intuitiveness point that I was talking about. I know a lot of people, especially people who are, 18, 19, 20, they're getting that part in their lives where they're starting to realize that a bunch of these shows and things that they used to like are actually kiddie and made for kids. But Doctor Who has that veneer of being called a family show. That means a lot of these people, I was the same way. They hold onto it, they clutch it, screaming, no, this is still for me, this is still for me, man. And they scream and shout when Doctor Who does anything kiddie or childish. The truth is, I kind of like it when it does stuff like that. I do like Love and Monsters, even if we're talking from an objective standpoint, it is kind of shit. Like, they're using this fisheye lens and all that, like it just looks terrible. Anyway, getting off topic again. I'm not saying all these fans are wrong for saying that they dislike Space Babies and that it's too childish and whatever. I just don't view it being childish as a negative whatsoever. I think this is a great start. I really do love everything about it. But I suppose the lesson that we can take away from it, even though I'm someone who likes it, is that the fandom as a whole. And I said, it's for kids, but a lot of kids think the same way. You need to at least have the facade of it being for all ages, because kids don't like it if they think it's something pandering to them, and adults don't like it, or young adults or whatever, blah blah blah, get all up in arms if they're like, but I thought this was a show for me, really isn't as good as it used to be, blah 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 blah. I think the lesson we can take away from this is that the first episodes need to be a bit more grown up. They need to be a bit more dark, guys, dark and gritty, R-rated. Can we get an R-rated Doctor Who, please? That would be so epic. It sounds like I'm making fun of people here, and I kind of am, but at the same time it's all in good faith. I recognize that that's what the people want, and so if I were in charge, or if I were advising Rusty Davies, I would say that's the direction you should probably go in for series 2. Even though I like Space Babies. I don't really have anything really negative to talk about this episode, I'm gonna be so for real, guys. And I love the story-based nature of it. I just think it's a perfectly structured, formatted, executed episode of Doctor Who, apart from maybe that first 5 minutes. And so for that reason, I'm gonna put it solidly in A tier. You guys can all scream and shout at me in the comments below. I know you guys don't like this one, but I also know that you guys don't like fucking anything. So I'm just gonna sit here enjoying myself and talk about The Devil's Cord, an episode which has massively grown on me and one which I enjoyed at the time. But I do think that this was one which, watching at 1 in the morning, really, oh my god, it did it such a disservice. This first 2 episodes, the first week where it dropped 2 at the same time, oh my god, it was fucking hell. So I recorded for 2 hours straight, recording my reactions, and then I had to record for another hour recording my review of both, and then I had to stay up till 11 in the morning editing the video. And so I'm speed running to get these reviews up, right? And it still took me 10 hours from watching The Devil's Cord to get the videos up. Oh my god, I was so tired on Saturday. You had to realize my schedule while the series was on was legit work until 9 in the morning usually. That day it was 11, but work until 9 in the morning. Then I sleep until 1 in the afternoon, and then I've got to work. It was terrible, man. Russell T Davies, please fix the schedule. Please, 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 please. But anyway, when I first watched the episode, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. And that was because I was just so fucking tired. That musical number, oh my days. Watching that, it's 2 a.m. My eyes are like falling down. I'm dying. I'm legit dying. So I was like, is this episode over yet? Oh my god, please end. Then I rewatched it the next day. I fucking love it. And I rewatched it the day after that, and then the day after that. Because that's how I am with Doctor Who. I'm clamoring for any type of content, especially visual content. I'm gonna go crazy over it, people. And the more I watched it, the more I just fell in love. I love the production design. I love the performances. I love the comedy. I love the villain, and I love the structure. This is what I like to call a quintessential episode of Doctor Who. Now, my definition for this is kind of loose and not really set in stone per se, because I think quintessential Doctor Who can encompass a lot of episodes. And it's not really about a set formula, but more about vibes. Now, not every quintessential episode of Doctor Who is one I would consider great, and not every non-quintessential episode of Doctor Who is one I would consider bad. In fact, a lot of non-quintessential episodes of Doctor Who, like Blink or Heaven Sent or Midnight or Turn Left, are incredibly well regarded, 9/10 out of 10 masterpieces. But also, I do love the formula of Doctor Who. I really do. And so when I see an episode take that formula and then use it to perfection to create an episode which I do think is practically practically flawless. I am enamored, I am amored, I am in love, because that's what I think this is. That's why I think quintessential episodes of Doctor Who are. They are episodes that don't deviate from the formula. They use the formula and they use it to perfection. In contrast, just skipping ahead, an episode like Boom isn't quintessential Doctor Who because it completely goes against the formula. That doesn't make it bad at all. It just makes it not a quintessential episode of Doctor Who. Quintessential and quality don't tie in. But I think when an episode like The Devil's Cord is quintessential and also just so happens to be incredibly amazing, that's when I am like, holy shit. Because genuinely, and I was thinking about this before because I just can't decide which episode of this season is my favorite. This one might be my favorite of the season because I think it just uses the formula of Doctor Who to perfection. I love the opening scene. I love the maestro tapping the piano into the title sequence. I love the landing in the 60s. I love the switching of costumes, the excited way that they run in and then they strut out. They walk on the street. There's all the cars. They're on Abbey Road. They do the poses. They do their little walk. So much personality, so much character. I don't know how people can't be in love with these guys, man. This is episode 2 and I'm already so connected with them. Then they go into EMI Studios and holy shit, the Beatles. The bait and switch, man. I just find it so funny. They're like, we're gonna have a Beatles episode, guys. And everyone's like, oh yeah, Beatles episode. The Beatles just play the biggest piece of shit ass song I've ever heard in my whole life. It's garbage. And the Dr. Ruby's face fucking full. It is comedy, man. It is so fucking funny. If you don't like this episode, you're a fucking hater. Come on, man. How can you not like that shit? It is so fucking good. And then they go into Cilla Black and she's like, we're happy, I think, perhaps. It's so goddamn funny. Chidi Gatwa, this is his best episode. I love the line, I thought that was non-diegetic, because it implies a theory which I've always held, which is that the Doctor can hear the non-diegetic music, and that's how he can tell the tone of every single scene, because he can hear the music. Like in Dot and Bubble, there's a sequence where if you weren't hearing the music, and you imagine it from the character's perspective, and you couldn't hear the music, there is no reason for the Doctor to be suspicious of Lindy or whatsoever. But because of my theory, where I think the Doctor can hear all the music going on in the scene, he can instantly tell that Lindy is sketchy and it's bad news. Bad news bears. But anyway, we'll talk about that in a bit. I just love that line. I love the piano being raised to the roof. I love the whole scene on the roof. I love the maestro emerging from the piano. I love the running downstairs. I love the giggle. Guys, I just love it all. The Sonic finally does something Sonic for once. Which leads us to the final sequence. The music battle. Shot in reverse. Guys, you can't tell me this episode isn't peak. A lot of people, they don't necessarily want to hate it going in, but they're not really willing to fill in the gaps in their head. They kind of want the episode to do all the work for them, and so they see that reverse shot of Maestro singing music band, they're like, that sounds weird. Whereas to me, I'm like, oh my god, they filmed that in reverse. That's so much fun. And that's funny, and a music battle is really cool and quirky and silly and quaint and perfect for Doctor Who. When you can't have fight scenes as your confrontation, you're forced to get imaginative, and I think the music battle is a perfect example of that. The Doctor beats the god of music by playing notes on the piano really excitedly. I just think it's a wonderfully entertaining sequence. And then the Beatles themselves come in and they save the day. They play, by the way, something which I noticed on a rewatch. Let me know if this is confirmed or intentional or anything. I don't know. It's just something I noticed. But when sings that song, that melody, which he's had in his head, you know that one. I love you. Is it just me? Or is that the Doctor Who jingle? You know what I'm saying. The sound cue of the TARDIS where it goes, you know what I'm saying. It's the same thing. Or at least I think it is. Maybe I'm just crazy. But anyway, I'm in love with this episode. I think it's a quintessential example of what Doctor Who can be and should be. I don't think there's anything I can change about it. I just think it's wonderful. Perfect Doctor Who. S tier! Which leads us into Boom, which, I mean, guys, come on. S tier! This is an episode which I thought wrongly would be bad on rewatch, and that because you already know what's going to happen, that the tension won't be there. Boy, was I wrong. This episode only gets better and better the more I think about it, the more I rewatch it. Its tackling and handling of the concept of faith and concessions and confrontations, everything about this episode from a thematic point is just on the ball. Again, every single one of these scripts feels immensely polished to the point where it feels like these have been going through iterations for months and months and months, to the point where this episode, as it is, I don't think you can change anything about it. As you guys know, I am the #1 member of the Vada the Sethu fan club, and yes, I am I'm a big fan of Mundy Flynn. I wonder what the character is going to be called in series 2, you know, because she's a companion, right? I heard some people saying that it was Belinda. Come on, man, don't call her Belinda. Let me throw out a guess. I'm gonna say Zara. There you go. That's the name of the new companion. You heard it here first. But anyway, in the actual episode, she is show-stoppingly good. She steals the show. Same with Kanto, their relationship, all of that. I mean, you just establish it in 20 minutes and it's perfect. The Doctor standing on a landmine is a great premise for an episode, and they do it justice. They do it completely truthful throughout. I think that the conclusion, the resolution to the episode is beautiful, actually. I've got no problems with it whatsoever. And that final sequence, I think, does so much to elevate the episode beyond a simple, you know, religion bad, faith bad. Because I'm of the same mind in that, yes, I think you can criticize religion and faith and all of that, and that should be allowed and welcome to do so. But at the same time, religion is a beautiful thing. It really is. There's so much importance and not heraldance. That's not a word. I can't think of the word right now, folks, but you know what I'm talking about. Religion is such an integral part to the human condition, and it has been responsible for terrible things, but also incredibly wonderful things in just regular every day-to-day life. Every day there's a positive experience that's connected to religion and connected to faith and all this stuff that brings people together and creates communities and creates hope in the darkest of times and is responsible for so much terror and also so much goodness. And I think that that final sequence where the Doctor concedes that, I think it just adds a whole other layer of depth to the episode. A lot of people, before the Acolyte came out and took the heat off Doctor Who, thank fuck, by the way, were so desperate for things to criticize this episode with that they were like, it's anti-Christian propaganda. No, it fucking isn't, guys. Be so for real. Thankfully, I think a lot of people in the community have come to the conclusion, even haters of season 1, that this episode is brilliant. So I don't think I need to defend it so harshly. But what I will say is that the very opening sequence of this episode is both amazing and also a key example I will always point to as, yeah, I'm talking about it in this video as well, people, because that opening sequence, it sets the scene for everything and it does it so efficiently and it's incredible. It's the highlight of the episode, actually. And all it's doing, the only reason that that sequence exists, all it's doing is trying to emulate the part 1 cliffhanger of a classic Doctor Who episode. I said this actually not in a video, but in a comment section on someone else's channel. I forget who. I'm sorry, guys. I would post the comment on screen, but I don't even remember where I commented it. But anyway, my point was that I thought that the stinger, the Doctor Who stinger after the Doctor Who steps on the landmine, was trying to emulate the feeling of a part 1 cliffhanger because we just don't have them anymore. And it's a key part of telling a good Doctor Who story. And so I was delighted and also, you know, a little saddened because we don't have that 20-minute format, when in the commentary track to Boom, Stephen Moffat said the exact same thing. He said, well, yeah, the reason I had to do that and make such an extended, like 5-6 minute long pre-title sequence was because it needed to be like a part 1 Doctor Who cliffhanger. But speaking of that sequence, oh my goodness, it is harrowing. The thoughts and prayers, I think, just hits so hard. Susan Twist provides her best performance as the ambulance. Absolutely terrifying, absolutely haunting, too real, to be honest. And what an incredible design. It's like a Dalek. Sharp Scratch, the guy leading the father through the land field, no, the minefield, and his death is just brutal and it sets everything up perfectly. And then he's killed in such a disgusting way. And we zoom out, we hear the scream, and we go to, it's an in-camera effect shot, which is just incredible, to the TARDIS. The doors burst open and it's the Doctor. Oh my God. Every single story in the history of fiction would be better if the Doctor just showed up. And man, I love it. It's the little things, bro. I love this show. I love Doctor Who. Something as simple as the Doctor showing up on a battlefield. He's got no idea what he's getting himself into. Man, it just does something for me. I love it. He's like, do you hear that? I think someone's in trouble. I'm just gonna go and get them. So he runs off because he's a hero. The music, oh my goodness. Remember what I said about Murray Gold? Season 1 is one of his best soundtracks ever. At least in years, but arguably ever. And this sequence is a clear example of it. I love it. The 15th Doctor's theme, he's running, heroic. He sees something fall down at the distance. He doesn't quite know what. We, of course, know it's the body, which is just terrible, but also, you know, really gets you feeling. And then he's running, and dude, just at the crescendo, steps on the landmine, and he looks up. Oh my goodness, what's gonna happen? Oh my God. How can you watch that sequence and not be smiling ear to ear, man? Oh my God. I love Doctor Who. This episode spoke to me. I think all of the ideas about digital afterlives, yes, it's all stuff that Stephen Moffat has done before. In fact, everything in this episode is something Stephen Moffat has done before, but I think it just works so well and it is executed so perfectly. I think it's such a well-directed episode and performed as well. There's just actually so much. I didn't even talk about the Doctor calming himself down. He's telling himself that story. One of my favorite sequences of the series, actually. He says that rhyme. It's a callback to Hellbent, but also it just adds so much mystery to the character of the Doctor and his backstory in the way which you can. That's the only way you can add mystery to the backstory of the Doctor in the present age, because I don't think the Timeless Child works, guys. But here I think it just is, it excels. Just that line. I mean, there's so many lines. The "you should marry Ruby, then you'd be Monday, Sunday, go on, I'd laugh every day." Damn, man. Oh my god, why is it so peak? Crime from peak fiction. That's me watching Boom. It's tense, the soundtrack is amazing, there's twists and turns, and it is so truthful to that premise. The characters get so much to play off each other. The actors do just an incredible, wonderful job. What did I say? If I can be bothered, I'll pull up the exact clip. I don't think I can. But the main sentiment behind it is that Boom is a celebration of Stephen Moffat's additions to the show. And for that it's S tier, but we already knew that. Come on, guys. Which leads me on to 73 yards. Remember when I was talking about quintessential Doctor Who? This is like the complete opposite. This is unlike any other episode of Doctor Who ever. Even Turn Left. It's not like Turn Left. But it is a bold step forward. It is a terrifying, haunting ghost story, confronting the character of Ruby Sunday head on, placing her in a nightmare. Not just a nightmare scenario, but an actual nightmare. I think it's a 10 out of 10 episode. I think this one is on the level of those that I mentioned earlier, like Heaven Sent, Midnight, Turn Left, easily, without any contention. I think people who dislike it don't understand it. I know. Controversial to say. Usually I'm the type of guy to say, well, you know, there's a bunch of reasons as to why people don't like stuff, then they don't always have to make sense to be valid and blah 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 blah. I do think that if you dislike this episode, you just don't get it. And I know a lot of people didn't get it, and I know a lot of people still don't get it. And I don't necessarily think you have to understand or know the answers to all of the questions to constitute getting it, because that's not what I consider to be getting it. I don't consider, or knowing the answers to all of the episode's questions, getting it. It's the best directed episode of Rusty Davies 2 so far. One of the best directed episodes of the entirety of the show, very easily. The music here again is haunting, it's on top form, and I still think I've barely scratched the surface in terms of themes, in terms of execution. There's just so much in this episode. Poor Ruby. That line at the end, everyone has abandoned me my whole life, but I haven't been alone for 65 years. Wow. I don't think it's the best thing Rusty Davies has ever written. I still think that goes to Bad Wolf and Parting of the Ways, but it most likely is in his top 3. There's so much depth and maturity in this episode, and every criticism that I've seen or heard of it has just been kind of nonsensical or stupid or just blatantly and obviously untrue on the face of it. A lot of people are like, the Roger Ap Williams stuff is irrelevant to the story. No, it's not. It should have just been set in that one pub. No, it shouldn't. This episode almost stands alone in that it is almost more than just a Doctor Who episode, in that without Doctor Who, it could still exist, and yet it being in Doctor Who elevates it even higher. What an episode. If there was a Z tier, I would put this episode in Z tier. My favourite of the season and one of my favourite episodes of New Who ever. Dot and Bubble. What a switch up. Could these episodes be any further apart? They are so different in terms of style and substance, which is crazy because they're both written and directed by the exact same people. And they're both Dr. Light stories. Well, I don't know if I consider this one exactly a Dr. Light story because he's on the screen, he's got a respectable amount of screen time, but he just isn't there in person until the very end. I think this episode is incredible. I feel like I've been using that word a lot. It's thematically perfect. Execution-wise, it's perfect. It's fitting of the age we live in. It's cutting, it's tense, it is amazing. I don't think it quite reaches the heights of The Devil's Court Boom or 73 Yards, but I would definitely still consider it an amazing standout episode of Doctor Who. A lot of people I notice focus on the surface level stuff when talking about this episode. They're like, well, the performance was good at the end. That is good thing. Bad thing, how come she can't walk without Bubble? And every time I see stuff like that, I just kind of roll my eyes because think about it for just more than 5 seconds. Try and go beyond the surface level, because yes, that performance at the end is really good. Yes, the music at the end is really good. But what is the meaning? What is the meaning of the scenes? What is the meaning of the episode? People saying the racism stuff was tacked on at the end. Are you kidding me? It is the main inciting idea for the whole story. It's like the seed of an apple tree. It is just foolish and outright wrong to say that the racism and classism element in that episode were an afterthought. I do think that if you're going to tackle topics like this is the level of maturity that I at least expect. I personally love Rosa. I think that that is the key example to me on how you do it. I know a lot of people, they're so desperate to hate on the Chibnall era for literally anything that they're gonna throw anything until it sticks. They're like, Rosa is actually a racist episode because it implies that if Rosa Parks wasn't kicked off the bus, then the civil rights movement wouldn't exist. And it's like, no, that's not what it's saying, idiot. Again, a lot of episodes in Series 11 I also feel like suffer from the blind, surface level criticism virus. People unable to dig a little bit deeper. Does that sound pretentious enough? Fuck me. But it's true though. I hear people talk about Dot and Bubble. They barely talk about any of the ideas at play, how they reflect and how they don't reflect. The key example for me is Lindy's movement. A lot of people are like, that doesn't make sense. How come you can't walk without that? Well, first of all, yes, it does make sense. That is how it works. Second of all, do you not see what it's meant to be showing? Are you so focused on taking things as literally as possible that you can't understand even the slightest bit of visual shorthand? I wish people were as needlessly nitpicky and critical about other episodes in the past as they are about these episodes, because goddamn, the double standard is just fucking crazy. The obvious difference is that when you watch these episodes, you were younger. Slash, to the people who watched all of these in a row, they were the first ones at the start. You don't have a point of reference. Rose is a great companion to a lot of people because she was the first companion. But with Dot and Bubble and with a lot of episodes this season, I just have to ask, if these were previous series, would you be so critical? But more importantly, would you want to be as critical? Because it's not fun, man. You're just ruining it for yourself. Seriously. I do think a lot of these episodes are great and just people are absolutely adamant that they can't enjoy them, or even if they do enjoy them, they can't enjoy them blindly like they enjoyed previous episodes of the show blindly in, say, Series 6 or Series 5 or Series 7. So overall, in short, I would say Dot and Bubble is an incredibly well-handled, well-tackling of all of the themes that it's trying to portray. And for that reason, I have no qualms about putting it in A tier. Which leads us on to episode 6, Rogue. Probably my least favorite episode of Rusty Davies 2 so far. I know a lot of people love it. I don't think it's actually a bad episode. I don't think that there's any parts of it that I think are really bad. I'm just not super into it. I don't really like The Girl in the Fireplace. I don't really like a bunch of episodes like this. I actually do like Rogue and I like his dynamic with the Doctor and I like those scenes. I just didn't really get a lot from it, which means that I can't really talk about it extensively. I know they threw in that Schalke Doctor, oh my god, it's him. I don't really care to take that bait. It's just an episode of Doctor Who, which is fine, it's good. But also when every single other episode in the series has stuff that makes it stand out and stand apart. This one's gimmick is that it's Bridgerton, which I don't like Bridgerton. I don't care for Bridgerton. I actively avoid shows like Bridgerton. So yeah, it just was never going to work out for me. Production wise, it's absolutely incredible. Writing wise, it's really good as well. Performance wise, everyone is on point. I mean, we're kind of at the point in season 1, at least for me, I know no one else is going to agree, but they kind of can't fail. I mean, they've got too many talented people doing too many amazing things for it to really fall apart. Which is why it's weird when I put this at the very bottom of my list, because I just think there's not a lot there. Not a lot of depth, not a lot to chew into. You watch it once, or 3 times in my case, and then you say, that was pretty good, and then you move on. Compare that to 73 Yards, by the way, where I could just talk about that episode on and on and on and on forever. Whereas with Rogue, I'm just kind of like, it's good, and then I move on. That being said, I understand why to some people this would be the highlight of the series. It really does play into that kind of fanfiction AO3 type style that a lot of audiences, especially Moffat fans, really enjoy, really connect with. Additionally, it's cool to have a very standard Monster of the Week Doctor Who episode in this season. It's the most normal Series 2 feeling Doctor Who episode of season 1. I'm not crazy about Series 2, so I think C tier is perfectly fine. A solid solid 6 out of 10. Can't really ask for more, no complaints. I'd love to see these two writers come back to do more stuff. I'd love to see new writers in general come back to do stuff. But anyway, it was most certainly good. Which brings us to the series finale, The Legend of Ruby Sunday and the Empire of Death. I am certainly much more forgiving of these episodes than most people, although I definitely do have problems with it. The number one problem I have is that the scripts are not as polished as the rest of the series. They just frankly aren't. Even the 60th anniversary specials and the Church and Ruby Road feel like they've gone through many iterations, felt like they've been really well thought out. The Legend of Ruby Sunday and the Empire of Death feel like ideas that Rusty Davies has had for a long time, but didn't have a long time to really put them in script form. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a first or second draft from both of these scripts, whereas I would imagine that The Devil's Cord is like a 5th draft. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know behind the scenes, I'm just talking vibes. It feels like there wasn't a lot of time behind these episodes, and that doesn't make them bad. In no way do I think these episodes are bad, genuinely. I really don't. Not even Empire of Death. I think Empire of Death is good, okay? I'm just throwing it out there. Another thing to make people angry at me in the comments below, because I know how controversial this finale is, and how controversial the last finale was, and the one before that, and the one before that. The Doctor Who finales are always controversial, at least they have been for over 10 years now, to the point where I'm kind of used to me being the only one who likes them / defends them. I defended Hellbent, I defended The Timeless Children, I did not defend the Battle of Ranskorav Kolos, even though I love Series 11. But still, most of the time, I do like these finales, and I get what they were going for, and I get what this episode was going for. And I think that 70% to 80% of the Empire of Death is really good. Notice how I'm skipping over The Legend of Ruby Sunday, I'll talk about that in just a second. But I think this episode just drops the ball in a few key parts, which I detailed mostly in my previous video. You can check that out, it's a really good video. I talked a lot about what I would change in the finale, what I think really worked in the finale. But by the way, when I say change, I don't mean like massive changes. I mean like literal like mini edits. Like as in, if I was there at the 11th hour, a week before it went out, what would I change in the edit to make it better? Those types of changes. I'm not talking drastically reinventing the script. I don't think the script is in need of a drastic reinvention. But as I said, I detailed a lot of my thoughts there. So if you're really interested in Empire of Death, I would suggest checking that out. I do think that from this finale, we can learn a lot of lessons, especially on what people want, what people like to see. The Ruby's mum being no one thing is controversial to say the least. Some people like it, some people love it, but I think overall, all of us can realize that that handling of it and execution of it isn't the direction that people want to see in a finale. With that said, I don't think this is bad. Legend of Ruby Sunday especially, let's just get this one out of the way. I think this is an incredible setup. I really enjoyed it. It's hype incarnate. Execution wise, it's perfect. Performance wise, it's perfect. Yes, you can quibble around and you can find a few problems in the dialogue or structure or blah, 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 blah. At that point, I don't even care. I'm just going to put this one in A tier. I think it's a really, really, really solid part 1. Great hype build. Really enjoyable episode of the show. Part 2, however, that's when a lot of the cracks begin to show. I don't think it is a bad episode or a bad story by any means. In fact, I think it's a really cool and really epic story that's handled for the most part very well. Emotionally speaking, I think that the core of this story is handled wonderfully. Sutek as a villain is fittingly epic. So well brought to life, so well shot, these episodes, so well imagined, and the soundtrack, man, holy shit. There are sequences in both these episodes, both these two parts, that have my jaw on the floor, my jaw dropped. And I don't really have a problem with a lot of the other stuff that people have a problem with. I don't really have a problem with part 1 being all build up. I don't really have a problem with the magic rope, because they set it up early. Again, it's intuitive. I like when stuff is intuitive. To me, I instantly got, oh, well, magic rope. They tied a rope around the dog. They put a leash on the dog. It just makes sense to me. But I can still understand its problems. It's the same with the giggle. I also don't think the ending of Empire of Death is as bad as the ending to the giggle was. Either way, I think they both kind of balance out to create an even point. So much so that I'm going to put this one in B tier. Legend of Ruby Sunday in A, Empire of Death in B. Again, if you want to hear more detailed, more formulated critiques, criticisms, praises of this finale, this 2-part finale, go back and check my previous video. Trust me, it's a great one. You won't want to miss it. And that appears to be the whole season. All 12 episodes, all 11 stories, all together on one list. I think overall it's looking very positive. If you take out the 2023 specials, the average is immensely high. If you include those, it's still pretty good. Season 1, in my opinion, was a massive success from a writing point. If you want to talk about it from other avenues, maybe you'd have to check out my previous video. But before we wrap up the video, let's see how this one compares to every other season. Series tier list. Here we are, guys. I've already filled in most of it. Apart from the new series, it's the only one I haven't put on the list yet. Now, of course, this is something I just whipped up in about 10 seconds. So not a lot of considerable thought has been put into this tier list. Again, nothing set in stone, folks. You guys know how it is. This stuff is always fluid. But I do think that before I put in Series 1 where I think it should be, or Series 14 or whatever the fuck it's called, I should do a little bit of explaining. I of course love Series 1. I of course love Series 3. I of course love Series 4. Series 5 might be my favourite of the modern era. And yes, I love the first series of the Rusty Davies era, the first series of the Moffat era, and the first series of the Chibnall era. I think they all knocked it out of the park. Yes, I do love Series 11. I think it's brilliant. Again, Chibnall haters be gone. You're cringe. I dub thee cringe. I don't want to hear a word of it in the comment section, you guys. I'm kind of out of patience. I'm not going to lie to you. Then we go into A tier, which is most of the Moffat era series. Series 7 realistically is kind of ass, but I just love the vibe so much. Can you blame me? Series 9 is one which I probably would have had in C tier last year, but then I rewatched a lot of it and actually I quite enjoyed it. Yes, I think it has a few episodes in there which I think kind of suck. But the main important thing, which is the 12th Doctor and Clara, I think are quite excellent throughout, even in the bad episodes. And I'm really invested in the plot line, and I think the finale is fucking brilliant. And so for that reason, I'm putting in A tier. Series 6, I just find a lot of fun. Series 10, I also find a lot of fun. To be fair, this one could drop down to B tier because, I mean, let's be real here. A lot of Series 10 is fucking mid, but then it has episodes I think are bloody incredible. It has Knock Knock, which is one of the most underrated episodes of Doctor Who ever. I love that one. It has Extremis, which is another one of those 10 out of 10 Doctor Who episodes for me. And it has the finale, which we all know it's great. That being said, it does have the rest of the Monk trilogy. It does have the Eaters of Light. The pilot is kind of mid. Series 10 is definitely a very good standard series of Doctor Who though. Series 2, being real, guys, Series 2 is kind of ass. And I don't really like the dynamics between the characters. And I think a lot of the episodes are pretty shit. Realistically speaking, this should be C tier at least. But again, it has certain episodes which I love so much that kind of counteracts that. And by that I mean the finale. I love Daleks vs. Cybermen so much that I think it justifies the whole series for it. So not high praise for Series 2 because I think it kind of sucks. But moving swiftly on to the specials, I am so nostalgic for 2009. It's actually crazy. But the one episode which I'm not nostalgic for is The End of Time. And I think that drags down these specials quite a bit because as it is the image on the poster, I do think The End of Time defines the Series 4 specials. And I think it is so unbelievably dogshit ass. Near unwatchable. It's a near unwatchable episode. I think it brings down this mini series, I don't know what to fucking call it, collection of specials from A to B tier because realistically I like all of the other ones as well, but End of Time, goddamn, it's so fucking shit. Series 8 is another series defined by high highs and the lowest lows of any Doctor Who series ever, and I think it just can't quite reach high enough to bring itself into A tier. But there are episodes in this series which I absolutely adore, unequivocally adore, Flatline being the main one of them, a contender for one of my top 10 modern Who stories ever. But then you have stuff like In the Forest of the Night, the finale, Kill the Moon, and it's like, holy shit, this series can be bad.
Oh gosh, it laid a new egg. Aww. It's beautiful. Doctor is beautiful.
I understand why people like it though, even though it is so unfathomably grey. Series 12 I view about on the same quality level as Series 9. To be honest, I'm gonna raise it to A tier. It has really boring filler in it, and the final episode is a tiny little bit of a fumble. It's about the same level as Empire of Death. But it was a very enjoyable time throughout. It has amazing episodes in there. I love Sacha Dhawan's Master. It does feel like a simplified, watered down version of Series 11 for me though, when it comes to character interactions and even direction. I feel like visually speaking, Series 11 is still the peak that the show has ever got to. But yeah, I would say that Series 9 and Series 12 are about the same quality level, which brings us back down to B tier with my beloved Flux. If we're talking about enjoyment, this should probably be an S tier, but objectively speaking, it's probably the weakest series of Doctor Who yet, because production-wise, it is so unfathomably gimped. No other series has to deal with only being 6 episodes and being forced to split up its main characters for all but one of them. Seriously, one of the restrictions of Series 13, I can't even believe this, is that the main characters can't even spend an episode together. What kind of bullshit is that? So yes, if you've wondered why the 13th Doctor, Yaz and Dan are split up for the entirety of Flux, that is why. The ending especially is really poorly put together. There's a lot of just terrible editing in that final episode, The Vanquishers, which is a shame because from a production standpoint, the Chibnall era is maybe Doctor Who at its strongest, but COVID came in and just tore through Doctor Who's production. That being said, it is a hell of a ride. I love this series. It is definitely one of my most rewatched, and flaws and all, I think it's an achievement, to be honest. And yes, I would definitely rather have it than not have it, which means hell yeah. Also, I'm noticing now that this includes the specials, Eve of the Daleks, Legend of the Sea Devils, and while Power of the Doctor is such a good episode that it might have helped out the series being raised to A tier, then I remember Legend of the Sea Devils is included, which takes us on to the final event. I've ranked every episode of Rusty Davies 2, I've ranked every episode of Doctor Who Season 1, and I have ranked every series of Doctor Who for some reason. I could do this all again, by the way. I could do a whole video where I just talk about ranking each series. I know I've already done it, but I could do it again, guys. Don't doubt me. I've rewatched all of Doctor Who since last year, folks. Don't get off track. What am I doing? I'm ranking Season 1. Where does it fare? Come on, guys. Have you been paying attention? It's S tier. Come on, guys. That's easy.
Come on, man. That's too easy.
You guys already know I was going to put in S tier. I fucking love this series. It's one of the most consistent, high quality, and enjoyable watches in the history of the revival of Doctor Who. Yeah, it can't chill up there with the big dogs of classic, but compared to some of the ones in the revival, it is definitely up there, probably in my top 3. And don't forget to leave your own in the comments section below. What did you think of the list? And what did you think of the season? How are we going, folks? What are we thinking? 8, 9 out of 10? 6 out of 10? 4 out of 10? 2 out of 10. Hit me with them, folks. The content train is leaving the station. I took a little break. I took a 4-day break, but we're back now. We're back in the content factory, and I ain't taking my foot off the pedal no more. So don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you want to help support the channel, you can click the join button below to become a member of the channel. You can gain access to a bunch of perks and benefits. And speaking of which, a massive shout out to all the channel members. You guys are the GOATs, keeping this show going, and I am eternally grateful. And a special shout out to Kyle Reese. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.